Welcome to Through the Keyhole Museum Tour. The focus of this particular tour is African home decor here in Atlanta, Georgia. Before we get started, we'd like to get some background to the inspiration of our apartment design choices.
In my senior year of college, I decided I wanted to go on a study abroad tour as traveling is much more difficult after you get a job. So, using the last of my loan money and a lot of overtime hours at work, I chose to go to Nigeria, which changed my life forever. First off, I never had such an experience. I felt closer to my roots than I ever had growing up in the southern part of the United States. Secondly, I met John. I had gotten separated from my tour group, but I was perfectly happy to roam the streets of Nigeria alone. It wasn't until it got dark that I realized how lost I really was. Suddenly, this strange place took a frightening turn, and before I knew it, I was in tears. One of the locals was getting out of work, saw me in my distress, and was able to get me back to my hotel. I was so thankful for the help that it wasn't until I got back that I realized I had lost my purse.
I had to double back to get home from work, and I saw a purse tucked there near a lamppost where the girl I had just helped had been sitting. So after checking the ID inside, I knew it was hers. However, it was getting pretty late, and I had a hard day. So I brought it to her hotel the next day. Thanks to her ID, I knew her name now. But I didn't have to ask the hotel clerk, as Tiana was sitting downstairs, leaning dejectedly on the counter as the harassed hotel clerk talked on the phone.
I was so miserable. My passport money was in there, and when John put on the counter next to me, I hugged it and him without thinking.
I didn't mind. After that, her mood was greatly improved, so I showed her around the city a little before work. She even brought me dinner after work to thank me, which isn't very common. We were pretty much inseparable after that, until she had to go home. Then we Skyped it and chatted. After 2 years of short visits and internet communications, we decided to get married. I had a job in Africa, but Tiana had a career here as a designer in Atlanta, so I came to America. At first, it was very exciting, but then
He got homesick, understandably so. His family and friends were all overseas, and while Skype is nice, it's not the same.
the culture shock was tremendous. The colors were less bright, and there were fewer patterns around me. While I'm not overly religious, I missed the familiar sights of mosques. I even missed the weather. While Georgia was warm, it is not hot. It's also much more humid than what I'm used to. While I love Tiana, I miss Africa.
I could tell he was out of it, and I wanted to help, so I decided to give our small apartment a little bit of a makeover. I traded my cool grays and greens for bright oranges, reds, yellows, and indigo. I wanted to be a surprise, so I asked some of his family members for help. They were very insistent that I use indigo.
My mother is a weaver, and the art of making indigo dye is one that is handed down the family line. It is a long and complicated process. The short version of the leaves of the generous Indophora plants are crushed and sculpted into balls, which sits for several days, mixed with ash and water, then filtered and dried. Created the dye. Though it was dumbing it down a little bit, the color was very symbolic. It represents strength and identity, which I needed a lot of.
This makeover also gave me the chance to learn about my own heritage. My ancestors were brought to America against their will, but I still grew up on the stories of America, not traditional African stories. It was a learning experience, so without further ado, I can show all of you and John my handiwork.
Oh wow, that is so much different. Where'd you get these masks?
I asked your family to send some stuff over.
Oh, good. Did you want to know a little bit about them?
Of course, I read that they're used for different ceremonies and often seen in African culture, but not much more.
Well, they are normally made of wood and can be decorated with paint, beads, and cloths. They aren't supposed to look like real faces, you know. It is more dramatically show an emotion. Some masks aren't used as decorations, such as ones used for funerals. But these look like marriage masks, so displacing them won't offend anyone.
I knew your family wouldn't lead me astray.
Oh, and what is this? Did they send this too?
Yes, it's one of your parents' wedding gifts to us. They wove it.
My parents do great work. You can see how complex the weaving is and how tight. When making kente cloth, my father weaves these smaller patterns and strands. Then my mother weaves into bigger and larger pieces. They are often symbolized within these work. And this one mentions protection from bad luck, security, both health and money. And this bit here means fertility.
Fertility. I think they'll have to wait a little while, but I'm glad to know what it means anyway.
Are we allowed to paint in this apartment?
No, but it isn't paint. It's an easily removable wallpaper. I thought some light indigo on the wall would really brighten things up. Besides, I know how much you like it. I also wanted to add some natural elements like,
The tree stump?
yes, like a tree stump, but it's not just any tree stump.
Uh-huh.
It's from a leadwood tree, which are native to Africa. It's a really dense wood which sinks in water. It's also immune to termites.
Oh, I know what you mean. They could stay standing for a very long time after they die because the wood is slow and to break down. Neat.
Yeah, it was kind of expensive though to get one shipped over, so I had to keep the old furniture. But traditional African furniture is more on the floor, and I didn't think I'd be very comfortable with that. However, I did reupholster it with mudcloth. I read that women traditionally make it during the dry seasons in Africa because there's less agricultural tasks to tend to, so weaving and pottery work increases. The fabric is dyed yellow from leaves, and then prints are applied with bits of wood or metal. The designs are made of mud, as the name might have you guess, but it's fermented mud, and it has to wait at least a year before use.
The one on the floor isn't mud cloth, it's a dinker cloth. Originally, it is only worn by royalty, but now it is more common places. People use it to tell stories or express feelings, as it makes many symbols. The print isn't made with mud either. The symbols are made of special bark. For example, this symbol means perseverance, and this one means love, faithfulness, harmony, and this symbol here means life transformation. I would like to say it describes us pretty well.
How lovely! It must be hard to remember so many symbols. Here, I also invested in some other smaller furniture pieces, like these stools. Stools are very common and are the main chair of Africa. I was sure to pick out ones that could also be used for end tables for extra function.
Yes, stools are rather important. There are a wide variety of them with different meanings. Some convey who they are for, whether it is for the provider of the house, the husband, and the wife. Authority figures have different, often elaborate stools, as well as people who share same beliefs or morals often have similarities in the stools. In some family tradition, a person is given a stool and they have it all their life. They are born with it, and when they die, the stool is turned on its side so no one may sit upon it.
Well, I got ours the same because I think we're an equal partnership. And while they're nice, I think we can part with them once we move. I wouldn't want to hold on to them forever.
I see we got some new dishware. It's the small detail that makes a difference. I see they are carved from wood with a lot of intricate details around the outside. Dye art is also incorporated in the pattern for decor, and the wood is often lacquered to prevent food particles from getting into the wood. I see there are some new furniture.
Yes, your parents sent everything in this woven basket for easy shipping, and I thought it was so neat that I upholstered the top with some fabric that they sent and made it an ottoman.
Good thinking. That is kuba cloth. It is often made using the leaf of the refa tree. However, it is a bit brittle, so we'll have to use it lightly. As for the basket, weaving is an ancient skill that is used for generations. Some weavers can weave so tightly that the basket can hold water.
While this is a nice basket, I don't know if I would trust it to hold water, at least not in the middle of the living room. Maybe I'll put the kente cloth on the ottoman instead so it's more durable and colorful.
Speaking of colorful fabrics,
The curtains, aren't they bright? They remind me of the sunset. I also added strings of cowrie shells for a change of texture. They also make a nice clinking sound when they hit each other in the wind.
did you know cowrie beads were used as currency in some places? Like China. They coated them with gold and silver. They also have some spiritual meanings in Africa, which they represent the ocean spirits or wealth. They hold the strength of the ocean. It symbolizes destiny and prosperity.
How is the currency determined?
Well, it is usually strength from 40 to 100 shells, and when there are 20 strings to 50 strings, it makes up a dollar.
Wow, that's so little for currency. Good thing we don't use that in America.
Oh wow, is this my old quilt from when I was a kid? I love the design it so much.
What does it stand for?
My mother told me that this quilt stands for warriors who travel while they are with the hunting parties. I remember wanting to grow up strong and faster like the warriors. That's what made me inspired to keep this quilt.
I'm sure you would have made a great warrior, and the bright colors really brighten up the space. Oh, I have such a good feeling about this. I can begin to picture it all. And what's this pattern stand for?
The pattern stands for different things. It stands for power, wealth, prestige, and status. Quilts that are made throughout whatever ceremonies that may come. Weddings, funerals, hunts, births, and even grown up to adulthood.
Wow, no wonder you're feeling so homesick. Hearing you talk about all this makes me feel kind of homesick too.
This quilt must be your memento because it doesn't look anything I've seen before.
Yes, it was my great 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 grandmother's. She was a slave and she quilted. However, over the years it's become damaged, so only the first 3 squares are from the original quilt. She passed the quilt on to her daughter, and it's gone down the family line, every generation adding a square. My mother did the last one, and eventually I'll add my own, and then I'll pass it along.
Wow, that is a great way to connect a generation. You know what the first few squares mean?
Well, sometimes they tell stories of the quilters' lives. During that time, slavery was everywhere, and people were often trying to escape. Some quilts were secretly maps that gave clues to where safe houses or shelters were located. Since our quilt isn't fully original, I don't know if it was a map, but I like to think it was.
Wouldn't that be risky? I mean, wouldn't slave owners know they were maps?
Well, they weren't like a treasure map where X marks the spot. Slaves were often taught poems to find their way because many couldn't read, so landmarks were mentioned or directionals were placed within the threads of a quilt. Slave owners didn't know the poems, so to them, the quilts hanging out to dry on the clothesline were just like any other.
Smart. I'm glad you had some history to share. It's our home, not just mine.
Having history from both sides of the family only makes it stronger for the future. Hopefully, by bringing Africa here, our future will be all the stronger for it.
Of course. Thank you very much for doing all of this. I hope that this tour has taught more about African designs by your examples.